Welcome back to Screenfish Radio. I am so glad you could join me this week as we are talking about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. The longest film, the latest film, and the longest title in the Mission Impossible series.
Yes.
And I'm so glad somebody who has accepted this mission with me, Wade Bearden, I'm so glad you could join me today.
Hey, I didn't get a cassette with the mission invitation from you. It was a Facebook message. Uh, I don't know. We haven't deleted it yet. We should probably do that.
Well, that's okay because your microphone will self-destruct after the conclusion of this podcast.
In your face.
Yeah. No, it's just that little whiff of smoke that they do now. If you know, it's like,
yes.
And then it's just a
yes.
Yeah.
No one will actually get hurt.
Yeah, for self-destructing, I don't think I've ever seen one of them explode once in any of
You know, Mission Impossible 2, he has the glasses and he throws them and but you don't see the whole thing. It just kind of explodes into the montage at the beginning. And that is a great way to just describe the second one, right? You got smoke coming out in all of these other films. The second one, like, let's just blow up the message. That's what the second film is in a nutshell.
And a joke about not telling you where you're going on vacation. Apparently that just bookends the entire film. Anyway, that script was brilliant. Anyway, I'm so glad you're here. It's great. I love having you. It's always great that you could be here. And Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, for those that have not been to the theater to see it yet, tells the story of Ethan Hunt and the IMF team as they track down a terrifying new weapon that threatens all of humanity if it falls into the wrong hands. With control of the future and the fate of the world at stake, a deadly race around the globe begins. Confronted by a mysterious, all-powerful enemy, Ethan is forced to consider that nothing can matter more than the mission, not even the lives of those he cares about the most. The film is directed by Chris McQuarrie and stars Tom Cruise and Ving Rhames, Haley Atwell, and Rebecca Ferguson. And as always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers. But Wade, you accepted the mission. What did you think of Dead Reckoning Part 1?
Yeah, so I liked it. I feel like I've liked it in the last week that I watched it. I've probably liked it more and more. I will say I'm a huge fan of Fallout. I think Fallout is the best film in the series, and so it's tough to top that. I do appreciate how McQuarrie gave us a little bit different of a film. It's a little more whimsy in a way. It is a two-parter, so it kind of throws back to the television episodes of the past, and we get a bit of a throwback to Mission Impossible 1. We might talk about that a little bit more. I don't think it's as strong, like I mentioned, as Fallout. I don't think it's as strong as Rogue Nation, maybe not even Ghost Protocol. So like it's really good, but I think maybe that tells you how much I do like the series. I just think it's one of those franchises that does a lot of the same things, right? You kind of have similar beats, and yet I love watching them, and I love watching them over and over again. I've seen Fallout multiple times. I watched part of Rogue Nation the other day, turned it on. I was like, man, this movie's just, it's great. So it is pretty amazing how you can take these types of stories and tell them in similar ways, and yet they're all pretty enjoyable. But yeah, I think Dead Reckoning Part 1 is decent. With these films that are like Part 1, Part 2, I usually appreciate the first one after I've watched the second one. So like Infinity War, I was just like, I don't know about this. And it's still not, I don't think it's a great movie, but I appreciate it more after seeing Endgame. So maybe that's where I'll end up here in the next year when I can see Part 2.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that was one of the things I felt about the film. People were like, "Oh, isn't it amazing?" And I know that Tom Cruise wanted it to feel like a standalone film. It doesn't. And I'm not saying that as a criticism, but I feel the same way. Like I actually felt the same way about Spider-Verse. People said, how do you feel about it?" And it's Across the Spider-Verse is a wonderful film as well. But it feels incomplete because it's only half a movie. even if it is its own movie. Like we know that this was all about the key, and next time it's going to be all about the lock, if you will. But it still feels incomplete. And there were scenes that I thought are drawn out more than they would have been. Like everybody said, compared it to Fallout or what was the one before Fallout? It was
Rogue Nation.
Rogue Nation. And those whole stories are compacted very, very tightly because it's only 2 hours or 2:15 or whatever it is.
Mm.
This one I could tell that they were like, okay, we're gonna go further. This is a 4.5 to 5 hour film. We're gonna do it this way. So to me, I think that's why it doesn't have the energy or the tightness of it, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But Chris McQuarrie can direct. He can direct an action beat and an action film. He impresses me with every new thing that he's doing. Most of them with Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm wondering though, for you, you mentioned about the other films. How has this franchise changed for you, and where we're at now? Because certainly it's although it's similar, it's a very different franchise.
Yeah, it is really interesting to watch the evolution of this. I mean, you've got the De Palma film, the first film, which is very much espionage based, and that's why I think you can compare that one to this one in
Yeah.
a sense. There does feel like a lot of espionage in this movie, and you also have Kittredge is back, and you've got the train scene. There's a lot of carryover. It's almost like it's bookending the series, and then you have the second movie, which is just out there, right? And I think the shot that encapsulates that film and what it says about Ethan Hunt is when he's on that motorcycle and that dove is flying behind him, and he's almost like this godlike creature who can do anything. I mean, he flies through the air like a superhero. But then you'll notice as we hit Mission Impossible 3 and then move forward, um, he gets cut, he gets bruised, he needs a team around him. And I don't think there's any other way to explain the evolution better than to see that core team begin to develop. And we see that a little bit with Rogue Nation, but mostly we see that cementing, or sorry, a little bit with Ghost Protocol. We see that cementing with Rogue Nation. And because he has that, they have this opportunity to say, okay, like he can't do everything. He can get hurt. He can be in dire situations, and he's got those people around him, and you care about those people, so it works. There's this scene in Rogue Nation where he's riding a motorcycle and he like hits his knee and he gets cut, and it almost feels like this throwaway shot. But what they're telling us is that our hero bleeds, and we see that emphasized even more in Fallout. Henry Cavill is a better fighter than him. He can do so much more, and it's luck and teamwork that allows them to win at the end of that one. And same thing is carried over here. So you go from this very much espionage movie to Ethan Hunt is a superhero, and then we start getting more stunts in Ghost Protocol, and then he has a team, and so it's really neat to see that evolution. And I love how McQuarrie has taken some of those stunts and really pushed them to the next level. I mean, this movie has some incredible set pieces, and the gel in between those doesn't always work. And it's funny to joke around because with a lot of these Mission Impossible movies, they have what I would call these wormhole like plot connectors. So they're trying to get characters from A to B, and they just put this wormhole in the middle. And usually it's like, oh, we got intel that they're there and they're wearing this bracelet and you can find them there. And it's like, wait a second, how'd you figure that out? Oh, you found it on a phone. And so this film, I think, does that to the max. It's a whole lot messier than the previous two films directed by McQuarrie. But in one sense, you're like, okay, like this is not a super serious movie. We're here for the stunts. We're here for the duplicity. And in that way, I think it works in many ways. Like I said, it's not as strong as the previous two, but it's still a good time at the movies.
You know, you talk about it getting amped up to the nth degree, and I want to talk about that a little bit, but there were moments where I thought, oh, are we approaching Fast and the Furious territory here? Like, are we dipping our toe in the
Hmm.
furious waters just a little bit?
Hmm.
Because it was just, but to me, the anchor. I mean, I'm sure the anchor to the series is Cruise, and
Hmm.
I mean, to me, that you look at the old films, and so much of it to me charts his career
Hmm.
because this wasn't never going to be the anchor of his career. I don't think. Like when he did the first one, they were going to make sequels, but he would talk about it. He said, like, I remember at the time, he'd say things like, I want every episode to be with a different director so that we have different visions. And they have that
Hmm.
for the first five films. Because like you said, there's De Palma in the first one, John Woo the second. Third one is J.J. Abrams' first
Hmm.
film, I believe. It's his first film. Lens flares and all. Brad
Yeah.
Bird,
Brad
post
Bird.
Incredibles,
Yeah.
or pre Incredibles or post Incredibles. I think it was
Post
after
Incredibles.
Incredibles. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I
And
think Tom Cruise saw Ratatouille or something. I think that's the story. Is like
is
he's
that
like
it?
Ratatouille's awesome. Let's have this guy do a Mission Impossible movie.
And it's like one of the best ones. But
It's great.
but you know, it's funny because, and I was saying this because our oldest is starting to watch him for the first time. We just started the fourth one. I think he's working his way through Ghost Protocol or just finished it.
Mm,
And if you look back at Cruise's career, the franchise dips as he does. So I mean, the young cocky Cruise in '96 for the first one, and the second one is John Woo, and it's still he's still with Nicole Kidman at this point. He's sort of at the height of his powers. And John Woo, we forget. I mean, he had just done Face Off. Like he was, everybody's talking about John Woo.
mm.
But at that point, the Tom Cruise love affair started to falter, and it was about that time was the couch jumping. I think it was after the second one was couch jumping
Mm.
for War of the Worlds. So when he did the third one, I think that was meant to be sort of the wrap up to the series, because nobody really saw it, and the people that saw it went, actually, this one was really good.
Mhm.
But then he didn't make one for several years. Ghost Protocol came out 5 years later when he was sort of, on a downturn and he needed an upbeat. And the reason I say it that way is because one of the things I love about that film is it opens with him in prison,
Mhm.
forgotten by everyone else. And it was sort of like that. No one cared about the next Tom Cruise movie. I mean, he did
Mm.
some stuff that like he was still acting, he was still working.
Mhm.
But like now, when he shows up, people are freaking out again.
Mhm.
Like he's Tom Cruise, but he had lost some luster and mystery.
Mm.
And since then, the franchise has been all about him pushing the limits.
Mm.
Like I said, I think that was the point. It was the Burj Khalifa that
Yeah.
he became a Jackie Chan-esque figure.
And the series pivots on that too.
It
It
does.
it 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 pivots. I think there's even a case to be made that he is our only true quote unquote movie star right now. And I don't when people think of movie star, I think of someone who's famous. I think a better definition of movie star is someone who can essentially carry a movie in the box office sense, but also just in pure charisma. Like there can be a
Yeah.
movie built around him and his vision. And I can't think of someone else because you have a lot of people who are very famous for, and I think there's been some articles about that, but Marvel superheroes.
Hmm.
But these people have had a tough time translating over because they're a part of a machine. These films, he is not a part of a machine. He's not inserted into a Marvel type world. It's built around him. And so it's hard. I don't know how many movies. I know Will Smith was that for a while, but he's not anymore. It is fascinating too how the films. the series as a whole reflects society, especially the fears of society. So you've got the filmmaking technique that I think it follows, but notice some of the villains I think are a good way to look at this. So you've got a virus
Hmm.
in the second one, and that was kind of what we're all afraid of. Philip Seymour Hoffman is incredible in the third one, and he's just this maniac, this terrorist. uh you've got nuclear warheads, you've got the syndicate, the apostles, and now you've got AI. So the film kind of charts along with what we're afraid of. I don't know what it's going to be next, civil war, whatever. Um but it's fun to see the series, to view the history of our world or our country through that series. And maybe there's an article or a book to be written about it, but I think someone could do some good work along those lines.
Yeah, it's really interesting because somehow, like again, we've talked about we you said this before. Each of the films is very similar. Like a friend of mine once said to me, I remember him saying like, "Man, like what's the hiring practice over at IMF? Because all these guys always end up turning and attacking the IMF. Uh,
The mask machines always break.
they always break.
Build a better mask machine.
Like we know that that what Benji can hack into like every mainframe. You can't
Mm-hmm.
fix the mask machine. Like, come on. Well, but it
every
has to
every
be. But somehow each one, I think they've literally said each one's been better reviewed than the last
mm,
for
mm,
since the fourth one, and it's the only franchise that I know of that by number seven people aren't yawning. Like I
mm.
can't think of films that by
Yeah.
number seven or eight people aren't going okay, and the star is not going. We better try something different here. Um,
Hmm.
but I think so much of it, honestly, like I said, like you said, he's our only real big movie star right now. I think it's a fair comparison because Cruise sort of does whatever he wants right now. I
Mm.
hear one of his next movies is just called the Tom Cruise in Space movie, and he's going to be the first actor to shoot a movie in space because he can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I heard a story. I heard a story. It was Matt Damon. I think he was on Conan. This was years ago. I heard it. And Matt Damon, they were talking to him, and I guess he was out to dinner, and there was Tom Cruise, and Matt Damon's saying, he goes, so I had to go up to him. I had to say hi, and he said, this Burj Khalifa thing that you did, and he goes, oh yeah, yeah, I've wanted to do that for years, and he goes, how did you do it? Like, there's no way you should have been able to do this, and he goes, and Tom Cruise looks at him, stares him in the eye, said, that's an interesting story. So we're out there, and I tell him what I want to do. I tell my safety guy, this is what I want to do. And the safety guy says, you're insane. You'll die. There's no way we can do this and have you live and have you be safe. There's no way we're doing it. And so I got another safety guy. And and Damon just starts laughing because that's what Tom
Oh
Cruise
man.
did.
Yeah,
He's
and you
like,
can hear him say it in his voice. Like you could hear Tom Cruise saying that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it is fascinating to view this series, and I don't know if they're planning on going out with a bang in part one and part two, and this is going to kind of be it. But you can almost see a universe where Tom Cruise is kind of doing Mission Impossibles until he can't. He's Harrison Ford's age, and he's still doing this trademark character.
he said
Um,
that. He said that. Did
oh,
you
he
hear
did.
him?
He did say that.
He said, I want to do it. I want to be doing these when I'm his age because Indiana Jones
Wow.
came out. Now, he might have
Wow.
just been saying that to help give the Harrison Ford bump, right? Like he might have been
Yeah.
saying that, but
Yeah.
I don't really want to see an 80-year-old. Mind you, his cardio at 60 is better than mine was at 19. So I don't know.
What's his run going to look like? Right? Did you did you ever see Jack Reacher part two?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like that movie's horrible. He's got that run, his unique run, and then Kobe Smulders has this weird run too, and they're both doing it, and I'm like, this is out. Got somebody get them a running coach. You're not doing your arms right, folks.
He has to do it like this. His
Yeah,
total
I will
straight.
say that shot of him running on top of the airport in this film, that was great. You're just like, that's what we want to see. Like, it's his run, and he's just doing it. He's going, and we love it.
It's somebody asked him, they're like, so where did the Tom Cruise run develop? And he went, it's just how I run.
Just how it's how I do it. How I do it.
Because it's so forced. It's like almost robotic in his movements, but
Mhm.
he's hoofing. Um, what? So I mean, going back to Dead Reckoning though for a minute,
Mhm.
um, I was wondering what you thought. Like you said about the villain being AI. I was
Mhm.
wondering for you how that really struck as it played out because it is, like you said, it is otherworldly in parts, and they're not the first film to do it. Like I
Mhm.
joke about the Fast and the Furious, but they've had the God's Eye in the most, like their series is nonsensical. It's just ridiculous. It's insane.
Mhm.
But they're not hardly the first film to do it, but there's something about this one that feels a little more current, maybe.
I think with Chat GDP coming out, so it just it almost feels like they knew that this was here. It's perfect timing. I what I liked about it is I liked Gabriel's character, this villain. He's kind of a weak villain. Uh, you've got Philip Seymour Hoffman, and you've got Sean Harris, you got Henry Cavill. You have some really great villains. Gabriel's kind of weak, but I like the idea that there is this AI, this entity, but it needs human muscle to be able to do its work. And so Gabriel becomes kind of like a tool, like a computer is a tool for us. The roles are reversed. And now you have the computer is using human muscle. And so I do appreciate that. I thought that Gabriel's character was a little bland, um, but it lends, I don't know, some credibility, some human emotion to it. I don't know if you saw that this film. It's probably 15 years old. Eagle Eye with Shia LaBeouf, Billy
Oh
Bob
yeah,
Thornton.
yeah.
You get to this place, this AI thing's attacking them. They're in the middle of the desert, and you're like, okay, the AI can't touch them. And what do? The AI like drops the electrical wires and like gets them and stuff, and it's you're like that doesn't happen. And so having this conduit who can do that is fascinating. And I will say too, whenever you bring in an AI like this, you are bringing in questions of like godlike power. And I like how this one offered a new wrinkle with the algorithm of determinism versus free will. And some of those elements I thought were really really worth chewing on. But the film does a nice job of tapping into some of these deeper issues without calling out to them too much. I think probably the heaviest line of the film is whoever controls the entity controls the truth.
Mm.
So there is this spin on AI where it's not just taking control and becoming aware, but it's creating these algorithms to predict our behavior and to nudge along our behavior. So we're seeing Twitter, an evil version of Twitter affecting the world for the first time. So in that way, I actually kind of like this Eye of Sauron imagery. I thought was was pretty good. So I did like that. I wish Gabriel's character was a little bit stronger, but I like the idea of what he represents in the movie.
Well, I agree with you on Gabriel. I'm hoping that again, a fully fleshed out narrative will help that
Mm.
because there's very clearly they've told you that there's history between him and Cruz. They've shown you flashbacks in the film and whatnot. So I'm hoping we'll get a little bit more from him. But he doesn't. I mean, you can't even compare him to Hoffman's character. Is just he's just on fire the entire film. He's so good.
Yes.
It's interesting because when I saw this, one of the things I thought was so strange was, my gosh, like here is somebody entirely just waiting for the computer to tell him what to do. Because Gabriel is well, Gabriel's sort of his archangel, if you will, right? You know, like you were
Mhm.
talking about the muscle for the AI. And I thought, is that realistic? And I guess, have we really ever thought of it? The funny thing was, the next week I was reviewing another film and they used the same plot. Not the same plot like on the whole, but
Yeah.
the whole
Wow.
premise was is that there was a supercomputer AI and there was a religious sect, you know,
Mm,
because the AI had achieved such knowledge, and not even just determinism, but like I know what's best for humanity because I've seen every permutation. And
mm,
so they willingly were giving themselves up to this machine.
mm.
And it made me actually re-reflect on Gabriel's character and actually think, okay, that's very interesting, because I hadn't thought of it from that perspective, that not just he's not just doing its bidding, he actually believes that the AI knows what's best and knows what's right, and he knows the answer. And that actually, I was like, that's kind of terrifying in some ways.
Mm.
I, you know, the performance of the character is one thing, but in terms of a villain, it almost made more logical sense than I expected it would.
Yeah, and they also keep it a little shadowy too, because you're not sure if he's also serving the entity because he wants more power.
Mm,
Um, and it brings to mind, you know, when we read the Apostle Paul, the idea of becoming like a slave to sin, there are these vices that we think are life-giving, and we pursue them, and we actually become slaves to them. And we almost see that with Gabriel's character. I was reading, I think it was Matt Zollerseitz, compared Ethan, on the other hand, to a monastic vow that's taken in service to his country. And he says, even Mission Impossible 3, he dresses up as this priest to go into the Vatican. And because of that, he has to almost swear off the women in his life. Though they cannot exist, he has to swear off this family, and he's in service to a higher order. We wouldn't say he's a slave to the higher order, but a service. And I thought that was really sort of fascinating. I've been thinking about that again, and too, I kind of like the idea, this cruciform key, right? This sort of religious icon that holds the key to deconstructing this entity, this quote unquote godlike entity. And so it almost becomes um, this Tower of Babel versus the cross in a lot of ways. I think maybe I don't want to read too much into it and be like, oh, the filmmakers have that in mind, but it does bring to mind some of these sort of ideas, and they really do tap into Ethan and his role on the team and his role um, as this sort of suffering servant. He's always being chased by the authorities, and he has to see people that he loves lost. And so there's some kind of fascinating ideas there.
I've always felt like the mission movies, like you said, tap into a cultural conversation going on. And
Mm,
I do remember like that one where he dresses up as a priest and he's underneath they're raiding the Vatican and all that stuff. I'm like, this,
yeah.
which is a fun sentence to say.
Yeah.
But like, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. There's some religious imagery here, and they're using it to effect. They use a lot of it
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
film, and I'm not, I'm not going to over spiritualize the film or anything like that. I hope I'm not, because, but yeah, like there's no reason to make the key into a cruciform shape
Hmm.
to try and unlock, you know, this or try it. And but I love this idea of the suffering servant. It was funny. One of the things I actually thought about this film too, since you know, we uh, talk about service here. This is the first film I think we've ever seen anybody get recruited into
Yeah.
IMF. And
Yeah.
now I think 7 and 8 were supposed to be the grand finale, but now he says they got an idea for 9 and they're looking ahead, like they are. But if this was supposed to be the beginning of the last chapter, and I'm not saying that it's going to end, what I'm saying is the original intent. I think it's fascinating. This one is talking a lot about choice. And although they've always said your mission should you choose to accept it,
Mm-hmm.
he's never really had a choice. He always sort of has to take the mission.
Mm-hmm.
But they talk about the choice with a certain sense of nobility and sacrifice in this one, because they're talking with what's Haley Atwell's character's name is
Grace.
Grace. Her name is Grace.
There it is.
And again, I don't want to go full, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like people, well, here he goes again. But in all seriousness, this is a film about choice and choosing to serve as opposed to feeling trapped by it. And I thought that was a very interesting conversation to have, especially
Mm-hmm.
surrounding AI and whatnot. But it really is an interesting take. I've never seen anybody get. It opens with a pizza delivery guy who's just
Mm-hmm.
on like his first day.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't like a huge fan of Ethan's backstory. I'm really glad they kept it light because
Yeah,
they could have done a whole lot more. But I like the idea of them recruiting people who are in trouble
yeah,
and what that might look like. I thought that was great. To the Christian symbolism, like whether you're a Christian or not, I think it's a really good idea to study the Bible because our culture is so steeped in Christian imagery that I think some of these images are kind of cropping in. Maybe filmmakers don't even understand the cross and what it means to us, right? But they understand the significance of it and some of these big ideas surrounding it. And so we see how that can have, an effect, at least a dramatic effect anyway, or a person sees a cross and they feel something. And so I think that is worth exploring. There's also this really kind of fascinating, it actually feels a little bit like Indiana Jones in the Dial of Destiny. You have this individual who feels like lost in time, like he feels like the world's kind of left him behind. And here, uh, you'll notice how Ethan gets the mission. It's on a cassette tape. He's this old school muscle. So he is AI before AI is AI, right? So AI is used to infiltrate some, or a virus used to infiltrate an enemy and covertly destroy stuff. That's what he did before that was possible, right? He was the one that infiltrated, disguised himself like a virus to get in, all that stuff. And so his world is constantly, it's changing, and he's struggling to keep up with that. And his team's struggling to keep up with that. They're struggling to keep up with, figuring all this stuff out, and they're being exploited by the entity too. So that adds a nice little a wrinkle to the story as well.
yeah. What's the line in Ocean's 13? They're talking to George Clooney and Brad Pitt, and they say you're analog players in a digital world, and it applies here. It applies
Yeah.
here. Now, Cruise. It's not like their team isn't tech savvy. Far from it.
Yeah.
Like Luther can open his laptop and do anything apparently at all. Um, which just makes you feel bad for Emilio Estevez in that first movie.
Dude, he
He's
couldn't even stop the elevator.
couldn't stop the
Couldn't
elevator
do
and
anything.
he's impaled, and yeah,
It's funny. So you mentioned the first one. I talked about some of the callbacks. You got the train sequence in this one. You got Kittred's back. But another scene that I felt like called back to the first one is where Ethan is trying to save Ilsa. She's battling Gabriel, and he's running kind of as fast as he can. And there's this powerlessness that he has, and it reminded me of the first one when he's kind of just watching all of his team members die. I think this one holds a little more emotional significance because Elsa's character's the second best character, I think, in all of the Mission Impossible movies. She's really great. um that that I don't know how you felt. I guess I could ask you about that. I was really sad. That was really, I almost hope the next film breaks rules and brings her back and was like, it was a fake the whole time, because I just like her character so much. And I think there's significance too. Like, her character appears in Rogue Nation, and the series does make a jump in my estimation, for this family. But yeah, so I don't know. How did you feel about her death in the movie?
I mean, the conversation of how this franchise uses its female characters is almost a different.
Yeah, I was just like, again?
Yeah, I mean, they're Bond girls for the first couple of movies, and then they give you some tough female characters, and then they kill them off. And I guess this is the
Hmm.
first death for his own team since
Usually they just
third one.
disappear,
Just disappear.
After that next movie, they're just gone.
And even his wife had to fake her own death, and
Hmm.
all this stuff. But I mean, I knew they were going to kill off somebody. They had better, if the movie's called Dead Reckoning, kill off
Hmm.
someone.
Hmm.
I was like, man, I hate to say it, but like I thought that her character had so much more to tell us, so much more to offer.
Hmm.
And like I wouldn't have been as much. I would have been very sad if they'd killed off Luther,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I would have been okay if they killed off Luther. Although, like what else is Ving Rhames doing right now? Um, but like
He's got to put food on the table,
he's
dude. Don't
got
take this away from him.
guy. I know. I'm sorry. You know, the guy's got to pay his rent. I understand that,
Yeah.
but
I felt the same way. I was like, I like I said, I think she's the second best character in the entire franchise, and so it was
she's
kind of
phenomenal.
sad. Haley Atwell is great here though in this movie. She's a really nice addition, and it was good to see her because, of course, she played Peggy Carter in the Marvel universe, but I haven't really seen her anywhere else. I Blinded by the Light. Um, she was in the Springsteen movie, but I was happy to see her in this film, and she does a phenomenal job and really sets up nicely for the second movie. I think she might even be at odds with Ethan Hunt's character for a little while.
See, I actually wondered, again, assuming that this would have been the finale, if the idea was passing the baton to Haley Atwell, um, because she's recruited, she's getting trained, she's now the mentee, or yeah, he'd be the mentor, she's the mentee. And I kind of wondered, I thought, if you're going to kill off Tom Cruise, which they never will, um, it would make sense to sort of say, okay, it's your ball now.
Mhm.
And I don't know if they continue the franchise or not, but that would be the only logical way to do it, is to have an actual passing of the torch. And I think Haley Atwell is wonderful in this. I don't love the fact that it sort of felt like, well, we've got Haley Atwell now, so Rebecca Ferguson, thanks. Thanks for
Thank you for your
coming.
service.
Thanks for your service. I was like, I didn't like that. It felt icky to me. I was like, this is, come on. Like
Mhm.
but because I think you're right, second best character, and I think Haley Atwell is wonderful in this. I do love Benji. I've grown to love Benji. Simon. I
Oh
mean, I
yeah.
love Simon Pegg anyway, but they've done a good job with Benji.
Mhm.
Keeping him out of the lab. He's not just the guy in the chair, to coin the Spider-Man phrase. He's not just the guy who's only on the laptop. He's in the field. He's driving the cars. Which we haven't talked about the stunts in this film. Actually, how have we
We
not?
haven't. We
We've talked.
haven't.
Go
It
ahead.
took. I felt like it took a little while to get to the stunts. Kind of waiting. The car scene where they're in the Fiat. I I'm a little conflicted. It's very fun. It's very fun. I love the Hitchcockian element, the handcuffs. I think that works
Yeah.
pretty well. It does feel like this film had a lot more fun than Fallout. Like Fallout's a serious movie with jokes. Some of these scenes felt funny, and that scene especially. And so it was a little jarring to me because I had just watched Fallout, but it was choreographed so well. Probably went along. I think the best action sequence in the film, well, I don't know if about the best. The surprising one is when they're in that really small alleyway. That was really
Oh
well
yeah.
done. You could feel all of that. The tension, the constriction. That's not a stunt, but I thought that one was really good.
I meant what I said before. I think McQuarrie has just this beautiful ability to tell stories in his action scenes, not
Mhm.
just show you some cool fights. but he continues his narrative in different ways throughout some of his scenes. Like it doesn't feel like the storytelling has to stop
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in the way he builds his tension. So, in the scene, the final scene, in the train scene, as they're
Yeah.
climbing out
Oh.
of the train, it's not just about escaping the train. It's also about how they view the key, and it's also about how they're working with each other. It's not just about get the thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just felt like the story doesn't stop. There are certain films, it's like, okay, we have story happening. Now we have to stop so we blow something up. Now we'll continue the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think McQuarrie has a really interesting way of continuing to tell stories through his action scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Tom Cruise, I think, make beautiful music together. Like, so to the point that,
Mm-hmm.
like, when the shooting of Maverick wasn't going well, he's like, "Hey, Chris." So Chris comes in and to work with the flight scenes, like to perfect
Mm.
the narrative of the air battles. And I don't think he's credited in it, but they brought him in to sort of
I
fix
think he's
them.
got like a screenplay credit.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he's got a
Okay.
screenplay credit, but I didn't know he worked with like with some of the stunts. Talking about that train scene, um, I mentioned Hitchcockian. We have a lot of really good Dutch angles throughout the film.
Mm,
And Josh Larson compared the train scene to something from like Buster Keaton's The General. So it's interesting to see some of these kind of mix in. But what you're talking about with the characters and the character building, I love what they did with Haley Atwell's character. We find that like she is this criminal mastermind, but she's a mastermind. She's a criminal, but she's innocent, and we see her, she's afraid, she's not Ethan Hunt yet, and we get to learn more about her character just by the way they're running through, or they're trying to climb up that train.
yeah.
And I mean, the whole sequence of them on the train, which is what, a third of the movie, or a fourth of, I don't know, a third, maybe a fourth of the film, that was all just so good. And then, of course, the motorcycle jump, which I wish they hadn't have shown that too
I know.
much in the trailers, and they did behind the scenes and all that. That was really wonderful.
The poster is just him diving off the cliff on the motorcycle. The original teaser poster. And I watched a behind the scenes on the motorcycle jump 3 weeks before I saw the film.
Mm,
And but I will say, seeing the film in IMAX, I was still took my breath away.
mm,
That stunt, even though I knew everything about it, it's something to see. And this is what I say about Tom Cruise, the comparison to Jackie Chan, is that his insistence to do things himself. You talk about the analog and the digital, bringing it together here. It feels old school. Like it
mhm,
feels like we're going to make something and show it to you. We're not just going to, I mean, they run it through a computer like everybody else does. I know they do, but Cruise is committed to making sure that you see him in the cockpit of that fighter plane. He's committed to see that you see him ride that motorbike. And that's the whole thing about them doing the behind the scenes beforehand, is because they want to remind you this dude did this.
mhm.
He didn't just he didn't Iron Man it. He didn't just put on a CGI suit and then they slapped it together in a lab. And there's something magical about knowing the use of practical effects in anything really. But
Mm.
the way that he implements it, and McQuarrie and him just seem to know how to use each other so well.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the form of films, right?
Yeah.
You can have these films that say something, but the form says something completely else. And and notice what the form says here. You've got this movie about AI, this entity. And if it were average blockbuster, it would probably be contradicting itself with the form. You get all this CGI and everything like that. It's like, oh, I'm using technology on that. But what this film does is it has CGI, but it's a film about AI, and yet when you watch it, you walk away with an appreciation for the tactile, for the real, for the I guess you could say the human flesh. We want to see real people doing real things, and so it's almost combating the AI storyline through the way that it's told, and which, yeah, I mean that's what they're setting out to do, and I think they do that really well.
And I think I like that you bring that comparison in because we'd sort of talked about the idea of truth in this film. But one of the things that Kittredge actually says, or he starts talking about that the lines have been blurred between reality and fiction. Like he doesn't use those words. His quote is that your days of fighting for the so-called greater good are over. This is our chance to control the truth. The concepts of right and wrong for everyone for centuries to come. You're fighting to save an ideal that doesn't exist, never did. You need to pick a side. So what you see with the AI storyline and with Gabriel, you know, I mean, the dissolution of truth, which can come with it, which is coming with AI. I mean, we see this, even echoes of this in the fight with the SAG after strike going on right now. The way that people want to use AI to create anything at any time and use anyone's voice. But what we're talking about with practical effects, there is something grounded, physical. This is reality, this is truth, versus an alternate one which can do anything. It can erase, it can put someone else's face on a digital screen like we see as they're sneaking through the airport. Where's that guy? What are they doing? They're doing all this stuff, and the reality is just completely blurred when AI is just allowed to run amok in this film. But Cruise's, see, to me, this is where the benefit is. Cruise's action films remaining grounded grounds the film in some form of reality and truth as opposed to the fiction of technology.
Yeah, I mean, it gets back to I think it's good for films to be murky sometimes, to blur good and evil, and talk
Yeah,
about how good and evil cuts through all of us. What's interesting about these movies is that's never really the case with Tom Cruise. And he's not even like a 007 type of guy who uses people willingly and then discards them. It just, sort of happens, at least in the latter films. But you'll find he's using the same type of techniques as the AI. Remember when the AI used Benji's voice to throw him off course? Well, what do? They use
that's true.
masks and they use that people's voices to throw them off track. So he's doing that, but what the film is the case is making is he has made, and it goes back to this vow, almost a religious vow, to do the right thing, to do the good thing, to value people's lives. And it's nice to watch a movie where it just, like, you get a good person and who's committed. And like I said, it's good because life is like that. Evil and good cut through all of us. But it is great to see almost this fairy tale, this myth of what it would be like if someone was completely good. And that's why Kittredge's character is fascinating, because Kittredge, he's working for the United States, right? You're like, oh, I mean, is he the bad guy? But the reason he's at odds is because Tom Cruise is like, like, I see something better, and I'm going for that. And so there is a lot of different angles to the movie. But it goes to the idea of goodness, but also, yeah, like how truth is used and deployed and who it's deployed against. There's some really interesting questions there.
It's interesting too because Kittredge, his arguments about what is good is entirely based on whose good is it for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like, well, this is good for me, so this is what is good, or this is my motive, like this is my motivation, this is what I see as good being. But Cruz's character, Hunt's character, sort of goes beyond that. And it's sort of like this, it's a sacrificial good. It's sort of like it's not
Mm-hmm.
about him, it's not about gaining power. Like the villains are always about gaining power. That's all they want is
Mm-hmm.
power and money. um but for Cruz, there's some sort of greater good that he is looking for that he never really states. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like Cruz has a moral compass that he speaks, like, I'm calling him Cruz. Hunt has a moral
Mm-hmm.
compass that he overtly states. You don't know the rules, but that's what he wants. His duplicity is always rooted in his belief that this is better for everyone and not just himself.
Mm. Well, that's a good point. And it's also everyone but anyone, because in Fallout, in this film, they've emphasized how he's willing to, like, give up the nuclear bombs to save that one person on his team. And in this one, they're like, you can't save Ilsa or Grace's character. Like one of them has to go. And he's like, no, I'm not willing that any of them would go. And I think initially that might sound like he's romantically linked to both, but I think what it's saying is deeper, is like he doesn't want anyone to die. Going back to just a random thought that I'll mention, I think what made Ilsa's death so hard is I think one of the tenderest moments in the franchise is when they're going to the party and she just like hugs him on this boat, and a really great moment. And that's when I was like, oh no, like they're too close. She's rat bait. Oh no. I didn't want to believe, but it happened. She got too close.
Yeah, that breaks my heart. It really
Yeah.
does.
Like I said, if they came out back in the second part two and they're like, haha, we faked your death, I wouldn't even be like, oh, y'all just fooled me for emotion. I'd be like, okay, cool, I'm glad. It's okay.
So who are you willing to sacrifice who was wearing an Ilsa mask? Just somebody who was at the
No,
party.
no. But here's the deal. It's her. But remember, Paris, the Gabriel's person. I say person, henchwoman. He stabs her, and they think she dies, and like, no, she has a pulse. He stabbed Ilsa in the same spot, and so they're like, she's dead, and they're like, no, she has a pulse, and they, probably not.
The post-credit scene right there is
Probably not. They're like, she has a pulse. Get her to the safe house, Luther.
yeah.
Can we also just talk about the exposition too in this film? Luther is always over explaining. He's always like, Ethan, you have to do this, and this. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure Ethan already knows all this stuff. We know you're doing it for us, Luther. But like I said,
Luther
it's Mission Impossible. You let it go.
Luther at one point is just going to turn to the audience and he's like, "Do you understand what's going on?" You know,
this is what Ethan has to do. This is why he has to do it. I'm going to tell him, but he already knows. I'm just doing it for you. If he breaks the fourth wall.
See, that's what I mean about the franchise is that it's ridiculous, but it's not nonsense. Like the Fast and the Furious movies, I keep coming back to them. They're
so bad. I don't know how people like them. I hate those movies.
I it's like watching a train wreck, but not like what we saw in Mission Impossible.
No.
But I've come to like them, but they're awful. Like I know I know they're awful. Like I'm watching there and there are moments I'm groaning. Characters are dead and all the drama is just taken away because don't worry, we brought them back.
Yeah. Like every time they say family, you choke up a little bit.
Yeah.
A single tear runs down your face.
Mumble growl the word.
You're like, I gotta go eat at Olive Garden. When we're here with family, I gotta go after watching this movie. That's like the greatest. If any of the Fast and Furious like marketing people are watching this, you need a collaboration with Olive Garden stat. And it's all about when you're here, your family. Don is sitting there and he's with, I don't know why nobody's done this yet. I digress though.
That I'm digressing further. You know what that makes me think of is in Talladega Nights when it's sponsored by
was it Applebee's or something?
Applebee's and the car is exploding and it's let's go to commercial. It comes back, the car is still going. That's where we're at with Fast and Furious. That's what we need.
Oh my goodness. And it is funny. I do think that in all seriousness, I think your comparison between those two franchises is really interesting because you have Fast and Furious and you watch the first one, it's very different from where they're at now. And they're upping the stunts, they're going into outer space, they're doing all of this. And you could make that comparison. You look at the first one, you look at now, you look at the stunts, but they're just different. And it's all about that execution and knowing where the line is, I guess.
And just to nail this down, both of them destroyed Rome this year. Within 6 weeks of each other, they all took down Rome.
I haven't seen the new one. I'm waiting for number 20 to come out so I can just watch them all at once.
Just watch it all. It's really just like watching one big explosion is really all it is. Well, one guy's drinking a Corona and the other person's exploding in the back.
Yeah,
but they're fine. But no, it's, it is, that's what I'm saying about this franchise is that somehow it's remained grounded no matter how, even though all the beats are goofy. Like we
Hmm.
know, you can chart the things that need to happen to make a Mission Impossible movie. They know. Like in the second one, they're talking. They start getting meta on themselves when the villain's like, "Well, Hunt will undoubtedly try some elaborate stunt by going through an air vent or something like this." It's the second movie. They've already given up on themselves. But there's something enjoyable about these ones, and I really think it's this one is interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this conversation on choice goes, if it goes anywhere. It'd be interesting to see if they continue with the
Hmm.
conversations. Kittredge even says our lives are the sum of our choices, so
Mm.
I'm kind of wondering where that arc ends up.
Yeah, and the idea of like, do we even have a choice? Like the AI, I love how the AI is kind of predicting everything. I think
Yeah.
that's really cool. I am looking forward to in the next one. They're going to go after the submarine. I assume the submarine's still sunk, so that's going to be a really cool stunt sequence when they go underwater and do it. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
I heard a criticism online that the film opens with the place that no one that we know now where it is and nobody else does, and I thought that was interesting, but it didn't
Mm,
bother me. Um, but it adds an interesting layer to the audience now. The audience now knows exactly where he needs to go roughly, and
mm.
he's just like, I got a key. I don't know where it goes to. Well, we do.
Yeah, I almost wondered if that reveal should have been more towards the end, when when Gabriel finds out, he hears it for the first time. But I mean, as they're looking at the story, is it going to be too convoluted for us? Are we going to
Yeah.
be as attached to it if we're just like, oh, it's a random key, like that's it? Do we have to know that? I also wish, um, I love the idea of like Gabriel's character kind of disappearing and stuff in the airport. I love the idea that maybe he wasn't real and that Ethan's kind of seeing him. And I wish they would have allowed that to go on for a little longer. And then you realize, oh, he actually is a real person. This is not just the AI. But yeah, part two. Does it come out next year? I hope it does because I'm interested in seeing it.
I'm not
Really,
sure how
really
much they
excited.
have finished. I know they were shooting them back to back. I don't know how finished it is.
Okay.
And of course, the strike is going to make some changes, but it is scheduled for next June. I believe it's scheduled for next
Okay.
June.
Oh wow. Wow.
So, well, I mean, Wade, I think we've talked about this movie just about every way we can. We should screen it or skip it.
Yeah,
So
you definitely gotta screen it.
it's a theater movie. I mean, Tom
Yeah.
Cruise has pretty much knocked on every door and begged you to come to the theater. Um,
He he literally, you've paid to see the movie. You've watched the trailers, you're sitting there and he's still trying to convince you to see it and you're like, well, I'm here. I paid for it. Just go. I never get those things.
yeah, it's true. He's sort of, or the "I'll see you at the movies" ad where he's on the plane. It's like I'm dude,
I'm at the movies.
See, I just thought he was working for Uber now, and he was just going house to house with every delivery, and he's dropping it off, and he's like, "See my movie." I think that's,
Right? He's
but
got to do something. His ex-wife Nicole Kidman has that great AMC commercial. He's got to do something. He's trying.
we didn't have that commercial up here, so I saw it online. Because we don't have
Oh
AMC
yeah.
theaters,
Oh
and
wow.
that was just the funniest thing. It was so good.
It just took off on a life of its own. It's just wild.
Uh,
Oh, what about you? I assume screen it
it's
maybe?
a screen it for me. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because I'm noticing that the franchise is not appealing to younger people anymore.
Hmm.
And I don't know why that is. Whether it's just because Cruz is getting older, or I mean, Haley Atwell. is well known, but all of his sort of actors are sort of older.
Hmm.
Um, but they didn't, thankfully they didn't like bring in Shia LaBeouf or something like that. Like, who's older now anyway? But like that guy, right?
Fool me once, man. Fool me once.
Um, the next one will be Mission Impossible: Search for the Crystal Skull, and
I actually do kind of I like Crystal Skull. I'm not a big fan of Shia LaBeouf in the movie, but I do. It's kind of I think it's a fun one. So
I'm glad we're not potting on that one. But anyway,
yeah, we'll do a capsule review later.
that's right. But no, it's a screen it for me because this is a movie.
Yeah.
That like we see so many films now that I think are great spectacles. CGI is, either at its best or at its worst, depending on what.
Hmm.
Um, but this is a movie. This is a see it in the theater and take it in for all of its scope and pray that Tom Cruise doesn't die while you're watching it, sort of movie. Like, did they
Yeah,
slip
I
that in the
mean,
final edit?
it is. You hear a lot. Oh, that was just a fun movie. It was just a fun movie. You got a lot of these movies that are going straight to streaming. Marvel's coming to Disney Plus quickly. Like, oh, it was just a fun movie. But I watch it, and we all, even the people that like those movies, it just seems like there's more and more fun movies, blockbusters that are just forgettable. And it's weird because, like I said, I like this movie and I've liked it more over the last week since I've seen it. But I've been thinking about it a lot. I've been like, man, that stunt was really cool, or that was really like it's not forgettable. I'm gonna forget some of the plot because I you do that. It's Mission Impossible. But the movie itself, I don't think is forgettable.
I find that with the whole franchise.
Yeah.
I think most of the films are good enough that you go, I remember liking that. That was a real there. And do you remember Burj Khalifa? Do you remember the train? Do you remember, like, there are things that
Yeah.
there are spectacles that you get in
The
this
the
franchise.
opera scene in Rogue One or Rogue
Yes,
Nation, which is like one of the best sequences in the franchise. It's so good.
it is so well done. And again, another great action scene that tells a story while you're doing it is,
Hmm.
is really well orchestrated. I think there's things you get from this franchise, and I don't know what happens when Cruise eventually stops making them, but there's things you get from this franchise you don't get from other ones. And I appreciate that about it. I don't think this film's going to win over new fans,
Hmm.
but I do think it's very satisfying sequel. And I don't think the series has run out of gas,
Hmm. Yeah.
which
No,
is crazy.
I agree, and yeah, pumped about this next one, and really excited about seeing how it all ends too. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Wade, thank you so much. I appreciate anytime we get a chance to chat. How can people connect with you?
Yeah. I'm on social media a little bit. Um, Twitter, it's Wade Hance, Hance. You can also follow me on Letterbox. Sometimes I do stuff there. I haven't done a lot of writing or podcasting on films lately. I did release a book not too long ago, actually about a year ago, To My Friend Who Left the Faith, and that's available on Amazon, so you can check that out if you'd like to see me talk about the Bible and some of that stuff other than film. So yeah, I guess that's where it can be found. Instagram, maybe.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. And you know what? I always appreciate when you can come on and we can have these conversations. I
Yeah.
love your input. Um,
Yeah, I do. I appreciate it too. And like I mentioned before the show, a few days ago, I was like, I need to ask Steve if I can come on, invite myself on, because it's been Fablemans was the last time, and
it
so
was.
but you messaged me before I could, so there's this connection. So appreciate being on the show.
You never have to ask. Just show up one day when I'm recording on a film and just say, "Oh, hey, guys, I just wanted to input.
Just real quick. Hey.
Here's my thought."
Yep.
Well, I love having you on, but for you at home, a reminder: you can find us wherever podcasts are available. You can find us. Smash that subscribe button on YouTube, as they say.
as the kids say.
As the kids say. But you can find our podcast wherever your favorite podcasts are available, and of course, you'll find more great conversations like this about films that are currently in release, and we have lots of great conversations with people, industry professionals, as well. If you want to continue the conversation where you are, you can go to the podcast page on screenfish.net. You can download Fishing for More, which are some small group questions to help you get conversation started wherever you are. We are hoping to be back next week. We're putting together teams to, or at least over the summer, putting together teams to talk about Barbie, Oppenheimer, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's blockbuster summer here at Screenfish. It's going to be fun. But once again, Wade, thanks so much. And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.